And we're live. Welcome, everybody, to episode 4 of the Community CloudCast. I'm joined by my co-presenters, Paul McCollum and Jason Himmelstein. And this month, we're welcoming our special guests, Spencer Harbour and Addis Hugo, coming to us respectively, from Germany and the UK. We appreciate them taking time out of their evening for us this month. So we've got quite a bit of ground to cover on an interesting topic this month. So we'll get the housekeeping stuff out of the way here up front and jump right into the conversation. So remember to join us every month. You can head to our YouTube channel, click like and subscribe to get alerted when we've got new broadcasts coming up. We typically aim for the third Thursday. That obviously didn't happen this month. I was actually traveling in the UK and we wanted to make sure we could get these guests on, so we pushed it back about a week, but typically we would be on the third Thursday and always at noon US Central Time. I already mentioned our guests this month. Why don't we just take a couple of minutes here and let them introduce themselves. Addis, I'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Addis. As you said before, living in Germany, actually coming from somewhere else in Europe, from originally from Bosnia. I am working with, I'm in IT since 1991. This is where even before, but that's where I earned my first money from the software development. And fast forward, right now I am running a consulting company, which is basically bringing bread and butter. And we have spun up a new company, which is basically focusing on product space, focused in record management. And there's a third part together with Mr. Harbour and a few other people who are brothers in arms, so that we are running a largest Microsoft 365 collaboration focused conference in Europe. And now we are trying with all that to spin up also a cloud conference focused on Microsoft Azure and to some degree on the Google Cloud platform. It was obviously difficult 18 months to spin something like that from the scratch in the past 18 months. Yeah. But we are happy at least to have the both things under one roof in the same time, at the same time in the same venue, ladies here in Düsseldorf in Germany. So yeah, it's basically a triangle of those three things. What I'm doing right now. Right, I met in person at least 2 out of 3 of our hosts many years ago, and can't wait to see you again after many months, brothers.
Yeah, soon. Spence?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Spencer Harbour. I am based in Edinburgh in the United Kingdom, or as we refer to it these days, Scotland. And yeah, I've been in the IT business for a very long time. I was actually doing something completely different before switching into IT in the mid-90s. And generally, I'm known as an architect in the Microsoft space. And as Addis mentioned, we've been working together on this conference now for quite a few years, and I'm very happy to be able to bring it back effectively after the pandemic enforced sort of shutdown, and very much looking forward to once again doing a real in-person conference in about 6 weeks, 7 weeks. I think it's coming up quite quickly on us now. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to that. So a quick shout out to our sponsors, of course, Aptigent, which is my company, and our Power Tools platform. But I also want to make sure that we recognize what Spence and Addis are going to be talking about today, which is the European Collaboration Summit and European Cloud Summit, which used to be or were designed to be 2 different shows and have now come together into one single event that we will be having in Düsseldorf, Germany at the end of November, beginning of December. Myself and Jason will both be heading over there for that conference. We're going to talk a lot more about this through the remainder of this particular broadcast, but here are the dates. Everyone can go to collabsummit.eu. I've got a link in the closing slides for you. They are allowing visitors in as long as you meet all the requirements. So there's nothing stopping you from booking a flight to Germany. And they're actually rather affordable at the moment. So you can, if you have some training budget left or just some personal budget, by all means, please do come and join us. It's a great event. There's going to be a lot of fantastic content, and really the first big proper conference that we'll have had in person in almost 2 years. So it's going to be fantastic. Well, we'll talk more about that coming up. So usually we do a quick bit of news here in this segment. Considering how much content we have to cover today, we'll probably keep this a bit short. So Paul, any updates you wanted to give us this month?
So there's an interesting kind of turning point, and this is Salesforce specific, but it is a topic I will keep hashing out on this call. Salesforce's functions have gone GA, which is a move for the fairly kind of self-focused Salesforce ecosystem to be able to consume as a first-class citizen AWS Lambda type functions. So for in-platform development work, which Salesforce kind of plays within its ecosystem, but it is cracking open the wide, highly scalable function calls. So that's gone GA. That's probably the biggest announcement that I have from the Salesforce piece. There's some other pieces on the side, but they're not as multi-cloud reaching, as kind of trying to make a very conscious effort to be able to invoke highly scalable functions and capabilities from other clouds and make them first-class citizen calls as opposed to hacks or third-party integrations native.
And is that AWS specific, or is there an Azure component here as well?
I believe that it is AWS specific. Their branding has left me with quite a few questions on how that works, how that rolls out, and whether or not it's actually connecting to your AWS instance, or whether they are proxying that with their own version of Lambdas and making it to where you can use that at this level for free with this license, but any other levels require other licenses. I haven't dissected it yet. It's just it's a move for inside out connectivity that I find exciting and should lead to a lot of things. Hopefully, stuff like SharePoint and other platforms where development is happening, to be able to have access to those and not have to, if we're going to have more than 300 people, we can't build in any of our existing platforms. We've got to start out and build it entirely in Node hosted. And this gives you an option to scale in platform, which I think will be super powerful and a trend that I hope to see other people do. I'd love to be able to call other services that are the high-powered, boutique services in other clouds natively from wherever I'm working.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, we should probably dedicate a segment to that in a future show and do some demos on that. Excellent. All right. So moving on to Jason, what you got, buddy? Anything?
Yeah. So I'll run off a couple of recent Power BI news things. Everything's leading up to in the Microsoft world, Microsoft Ignite. It's next week. If you haven't registered for it, you probably have a couple dozen emails if you do anything Microsoft that say go register for this. It's running Tuesday to Thursday of next week, which, if I'm not mistaken, that's November 2nd to the November 4th. It's completely virtual, repeating in all time zones. Not as much Power BI as I was hoping there'd be, to be honest with you. Kind of covered that off in the podcast if you listen to my Focal show. So John and I kind of went off on a tangent on that. There's going to be a lot of Synapse news. There's a lot of stuff going on in that space. It's sort of taking a little bit of the thunder away from Power BI right now. But we did get the latest service update early in the month of October. So hopefully we'll get another update coming early in November to align itself with Ignite, or maybe post-Ignite if there's going to be anything that they're going to be announcing that's going to be of relevance there. But the other big news is that, and we've been waiting for this for quite a while, Power BI Premium Gen 2 finally went GA. That happened at the beginning of October. We've seen some positivity and we've seen some negativity happen around it. There's a decent amount of chatter on Twitter about people that have run into problems. Microsoft seems to be aware of those, but report things in that you're hearing. But for the most part, personally, I've not run into problems at this point. I spend a lot of time in the A SKUs as opposed to the P SKUs. So, but a lot of good functionality that's there. And by middle of next month, if I'm not mistaken, we're supposed to start seeing auto scale really kick on, which will allow us to take the SKU that you're in and incrementally add CPUs in order to be able to process where you run into contention if you have it turned on. Again, this is something that you have to go turn on today, but ultimately they're going to migrate people over. Probably by summer, it would be my guess. We'll see nobody on the Gen 1 architecture unless it's explicitly stated that it has to be. Otherwise, from the Power BI side of the world, not as much going on right now because I think they're waiting again for some of the bigger announcements, hopefully, that they've hidden from us so far. And we'll hear about that coming up at Ignite. That's all I got.
Yeah, thanks, Jace. Yeah, really the same thing on the Azure side. Pretty thin on the news front ahead of Ignite, as is usually the case. A couple of things to mention. Folks can come back and reference this slide. Purview has gone GA, which is your cross-platform data governance inside of Azure. The secure IoT edge stuff in the Enclave blueprint is out, even with some reference devices. So building on IoT has a reference architecture there. That's available with some examples from partners that they've worked with to deploy some actual hardware. And then one that I found interesting, very interesting for our space, was Microsoft's acquisition of Clear Software, which initially out of the box looks like a bit of a strange acquisition until you realize that they have over 2,000 connectors for SAP and Oracle. And that's the real meat and potatoes of what they're doing. They claim to do some RPI and iPaaS. I'm not sure. I dug down into it a bit because this is squarely within our space at Aptigent to get some more details. And I didn't quite get a clear picture of where the value was there. But being able to kind of tying in, Paul, with what you were saying earlier about Salesforce, being able to natively integrate from Power Platform into SAP and Oracle, making first-class API calls there has a lot of value in the Microsoft space, no question. So they've been very focused on those particular areas. I wish they had disclosed the terms of the deal. Could have helped us in our valuation, but we'll have to wait until next July when they say how much they actually paid for it. But some interesting things happening in that particular space. So links are on there. I'll put them in the description after the broadcast, so y'all go check that out if you want some more information about those. But let's get into what we really came here to talk about, and that is a discussion with Spence and Addis. So let me frame this a little bit. What we want to do here is have a conversation about community events on the whole. A lot of folks are familiar with smaller type of community events they've attended in the past, SharePoint Saturdays, SQL Saturdays, those types of things, typically put on for 50, 200 people, maybe 300 or 400 at the most. Pretty successful over the years, but going from that level to a large conference, maybe not on the scale of Ignite, but certainly on the scale of most of the commercial conferences that people are used to going to, is a huge step, and it's a world of difference. And trying to translate that from the smaller ones into the bigger ones is quite a challenge, in my opinion. So what I thought we'd do is get Spence and Addis to give us their perspective on that whole process and how it's come together with them. So I've got a few questions teed up here. Of course, everyone feel free to jump in, but let's set the ground here a little bit and really ask, first of all, in your opinion, what is the difference between a community event and a commercial event?
So can I gush for just a second? I as part of a segue into this conversation and for people asking questions online or why they do. So Spence, I am very happy to be on a show with you today. I have been a fan of yours since I walked up close to the stage in one of the SharePoint 2010, 2013-ish conferences when you were leading kind of your thought leadership behind the Visio web service or Visio services web part.
Wow.
You go way back. So you
Back.
have been at the pinnacle of interesting information several times. And it's been fun watching you pick these things up and kind of provide thought leadership around the Microsoft space on those different topics. So very much setting that framework. If you've got questions about how events have evolved and gone, Spence has been speaking since there have been places to be speaking. Eric as well. This is just my first time to get to meet and say thank you for answering that question so many years ago.
Yeah, there's a rock in Rome that I think Spence carved his name into years and years and years ago. So.
Wow, I didn't know we had fanboying on this website.
Yeah, sorry. I don't want you to harbor any jealousy over my fanboying.
Nice. Good use of Harbour there.
Wasn't really expecting a mention of the Visio web part, but nonetheless,
That room can be a ghost room from time to time, but yeah.
Yeah, ghosts of.
We need to memory hole that.
Yeah, we won't talk about Silverlight's relationship to that at all.
Hey.
Oh no, Silverlight is still there. They have just been merged with Infopath.
Yeah, I think I was using that in one of my Access projects recently. So.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly actually, without sort of trying to be too trite about it, it does actually dovetail quite well to the framing of Eric's question, because there is so much involved in the execution of community events around the world that actually does, you can draw a line back to the very early days of particularly the Microsoft technology community and the events that used to happen in the 1990s, the late 1990s. And it's very easy to actually sort of draw the dots connecting them and the things that worked well and the things that didn't, particularly with a community focus. I think from my point of view, the key difference between a community event and a commercial event is the vibe and atmosphere present in the event space, and that could be everything from a clear difference in terms of just how much sort of vendor / commercial pressure is put on the event generally in terms of, expectations on how sort of heavy a sale is being produced in front of you, all the way through to just the general atmosphere and camaraderie between the attendees. Obviously, there's a large degree of cultural difference as well, depending on where the event has been held. That's a very important factor here. There's a way of doing events in the United States. It's very different from the way we do in Europe. That's very different from how it would be done in the Far East. And, that's key to it. One of the things that we see as a mistake made by others is attempting to carbon copy an event that works in the United States into other parts of the world. And that's a natural thing to try and do, right? If you've been successful one place, to try and, take it and do it somewhere else. But it's also very important that you make the changes necessary to be successful elsewhere. And that would be true in the other direction as well. If we have had years past a very successful conference every year in London, run by a mutual friend of ours, Steve Smith. And we would never have dreamt to take that to the United States and try and do a cookie cutter version of it, because we knew that would not work in terms of simple things. The lunch arrangements, how long lunch is, what food is served, how it's served, it's that type of thing's very different. And you need to really pay attention to that, because otherwise, obviously that's a downer for attendees, and therefore the rest of the show is not as enjoyable. There's many other small differences that sort of delineate or make it clear what the difference is. But I think also just that sense of community is much more present at a non-commercially driven event, because it sort of flows through everything, right? I mean, the attendees can pick up on that, but also the people there, the sponsors, the people who are there to sell, know that they need to behave slightly differently at somewhere like one of the big vendor shows or one of the big commercial events. There's more pressure on them to behave a certain way. And so, you can sort of say the things that work well in a user group or small local community event, like a SharePoint Saturday or a SQL Saturday, those can be translated directly to the larger shows. Obviously, there's other challenges around scale, but most of those things do actually work out the same way, just on a larger scale at an event like ECS. And we've done ECS now at that scale for for 2 years previously, and that's very clear to us, and we get that feedback from the vendors and attendees as well, positive feedback that reinforces we're doing the right things there. Making sure, a simple thing would be making sure that there is a quality and a long enough SharePoint, as we call it historically, at the end of the first day. We'll never not do that because we know everybody appreciates it. Obviously, if people eventually turn around and say, well, we don't like that so much anymore, then we would reconsider. But we know that that's an important part of the event, as important as the regular expo hours, for example.
I have never heard anybody saying that they don't like beer, free beer
Exactly.
and wine. I mean, a lot would have to happen in order for that to happen.
And in our case, I mean, not to sort of spend the whole show talking about how wonderful we are, but in our case, you don't have to pay $8 for a Heineken, and that's the difference between a commercial event that's run by the numbers and a not-for-profit.
I mean, one thing is paying that silly money for a beer, but that's completely other thing paying it for Heineken. I mean, this is just especially from European perspective, is just completely not understandable. No, I mean, I would just a slight correction. I would say that actually the last show in Zagreb is where it started to grow, where we had over 500 attendees in Zagreb, Croatia, another European city, obviously way smaller setup than in Germany for many different reasons. Economy, market, and everything what goes with that. But it was clear that people wanted a straightforward, no BS show, where people just come, where the sponsors are openly talking to the attendees, where speakers are approachable. For many years, we did not even have a speaker room. Now we turned to Nick Down to have one. But that not having a speaker room was actually on purpose. We did not want speaker just to hide somewhere and basically never see the attendees. Now we ensure that doesn't happen in different ways. We do have a speaker room, but everybody seems to kind of appreciate this different vibe that Spence was talking about. Even sponsors. I mean, we've got our sponsors number is growing from year to year, so that even works for them. But as Spence said, they need to adjust a bit the way they talk to people there. So, but it's on the end, it works for them. Challenges, well, there are many, obviously.
So I want to make two comments real quick. Number one, I agree with you. The first year I did it, there wasn't a speaker room, which was very interesting. I spent more time out on the trade show floor, walking around, getting to know people a little bit more. And the last time I was in an ECS speaker room, though, I believe that the heat was turned up to a solid 40 degrees Celsius. Like it was warm in that room. And I was I was like, I have a conference call I need to finish up doing. And you walked in the room and he goes, and I believe you said to me, so go out on the floor then. We don't want you in here. The other comment that I'd like, and I love that about it as well. But the other comment I want to make is what the ECS for me shows that just because it's a community conference does not mean that we don't see extremely high quality. ECS is one of the highest quality conferences I've ever attended, partly because you care so much and so deeply about it, the two of you as well as the rest of the organizing committee. But beyond that, it's being put on by community for community, and you want to put on a great event for yourselves to be able to enjoy as well. It's not just about making money, right? It's about putting this together for the community, and the quality is unbelievably high as a result of the dedication and passion that the crew has, as well as every speaker who comes. It's an honor, a true honor to get to come and speak at this event. I love the fact that I get to come and do it. I'm bringing my dad with me this year. He gets to come and see it. It's really, it's my favorite event to come to. And I say that in front of anybody who's listening, any other conferences that I go to, going over to Europe and getting to spend the time with you folks as well as that community is truly a joy. And I'm so glad this is the first one back and we get to go do it in person again.
Well, let me pick up on something that Addis mentioned, because that was actually my next question. This didn't just happen overnight, right? This ECS grew from a regular small community event into something that, without bragging, is the largest collab-focused conference in the Microsoft space in all of Europe. So, Addis, give us a little bit of that history. How did this thing become such a juggernaut?
In a pub after a few beers. I'm not, but this is how the old great stories start. You all know Nenad and Tony, basically. Okay, Paul doesn't know them, but we'll fix that at some point of time. It was Nenad. We were in a pub in Croatia, somewhere on the Croatian coast. I think having our third beer or something like that. Nenad said, "Why don't we do our own conference?" And we were at the conference speaking at point as a speakers, all three of us. And Tony said, "You are all crazy." And then I said, "Why not?" So we started 2012, the very first conference in Zagreb in Croatia. We had 150 attendees, which we thought was great. And I think it was great, basically. We were never SharePoint Saturday. We always asked for some small fee because we know the audience and we know if they can just register and not pay anything for that, they're just not going to show up. But if you put a fee like $50, it doesn't have to be some insane fee. We put a really small fee. Then people actually turn out and be at the conference. So we put the price. I think it was $40-50. I can't remember anymore. And we had 150 people the first year, 2012. It was 1-day event. And then Tony, who was the most reluctant in the first year, said, "Now we are going to do to make it 2 days event." So it was 2 days event, and at some point of time, 1 year, Tony was traditionally doing speakers in the first year and second year. Third year, he could not have do speakers for whatever the reason. It was 2016. We have skipped 1 year, and I did the business track and the development track, and I was looking at all those IT pro sessions. I was like, my God, I mean, they all sound the same. Why would anybody take any of them? This was the moment where I pinged Spence on a Facebook Messenger. "Hey mate, can you take a look at those IT pro sessions?" And he was like, "Sure, yes, why not?" And this was the year where Spence basically slowly entered came on the board. And now, 5 years later, we are where we are. We are doing what we are doing, and that was basically the history of all of it. I would like just, Eric, before you go on, to continue on what Spence was saying the last time, what are the challenges? The major one, we are not really doing this to get rich. I mean, if you know our prices and you know of costs, there is no getting rich here. But that also means that a lot of people are doing a lot of work for not being paid well. So what that then means is that many people come, I want to help. They see what we are doing. And after 2 days, they were like, "I'm not doing this." So I've seen a collab days event, online collab days event a few days ago. Really nothing against them. They did a great job. They had it's a traditional in Netherlands and Belgium. On the end, they had 9 people doing a 1-day online event. If you know that the whole collab summit is organized by Margit, Elena, Spence, Nenad, and me, how much people is that? 5. And there's nobody else.
And let's be honest, we know who's doing the most work. That's Margit and Elena. We know that for a fact.
Exactly.
Yep.
So
I think that's actually really important, to both what Addis has just said, but also to Jason's point. I mean, one of the other key differences is the content. And the people who are involved in that whole selection process, we don't have any marketing people in there. We're not trying to meet a quota of X number of sessions related to SharePoint spaces and then X number of sessions related to, whatever. So we're trying our best to give a good quality level for the content, to also have a sort of balance there, so we've got some level 100 beginner stuff and we've got some, level 400, bit deeper, but also give opportunity to new speakers, so our show is not going to have the same old speakers every time. We always want to have a certain amount of people who have being given an opportunity to speak at a larger show than they would otherwise get, right? Because everything else, you're either going from like the user group style, 50 to 100, then it's maybe a slightly larger show, but then it's the big show, so it's very difficult for people to get into this. And some people, do it for a couple of years and then decide that public speaking is not for them. Others do very well. Actually, I remember, Eric, that was, you did your first speaking at some tech ed contesty type thing, didn't you? And then grew from there. And so we want to try and keep that kind of thing going as part of the difference in the vibe of the event. And I think because we have a small team, and because most of that team are in the community itself, we are part of the community. We're not some external that's been brought in to try and make sure that everything looks good on a spreadsheet. In terms of balance, that we get the positive feedback that our content is to that quality level that Jason described. I think that's part and parcel of making, as Addis mentioned, we're doing it not to make money. We're doing it to make a good show. And that, naturally will be demonstrated, we hope, by the end result.
So I had a question. I'd like to not compare and contrast, but just share some of the challenges. I got to go to the Dreamforce conference. That's usually 175,000 people. I've spoken at the last couple. This year it was invite only, and I think they invited 6,000. There were probably only 600 attendees. But want to share some of the COVID-related impact stuff on that and see what your thoughts are. Like I said, it was a great conference. The community, the content was very much community focused. There was less hype, so lots of engagement. They had, ticking off, they had daily COVID testing requirements for every attendee. You had to drop off a sample in the morning to be admitted the next day, and you had to take pre-test and mail them in before, so that you could be admitted on the first day, like the week prior on the weekend. That caused some interesting challenge for people that had already had COVID and still had antibodies. They assumed that, hey, I've had it. That's the same thing as the vaccine. I should be allowed. That wasn't really, some of those requirements and, safety precautions weren't fully made clear. There were metal detectors, lots of the testing was there, but the biggest thing that I came back with that challenged me, and we discussed before the call, I'm a little hard of hearing, so masks on for the speakers and the engagement made it hard for me to hear and absorb some of the content. And the other thing, because I would be tracking down knowledgeable people, and I can usually go find them by their face, trying to read everybody's badge at waist level or trying to recognize them by their hairstyle got uncomfortable. So I was stereotyping people by their top of their head and or awkwardly staring at their midsection trying to read names. So I keep looking for clear masks and name tags that are on masks or on hats or something like that, so that you can find people in an appropriate area of the body to be staring. So those were my kind of takeaways from my first in-person event, and I would love to hear your thoughts on where that went.
Real quick, that reminds me, before I get to ECS, I'm going to shave my head and I'm going to wear a different wig every day.
And you should.
Spence, this really means for us that we need to think how to design badges this time. No, this is what Paul is saying is completely right. So some of those things are sold differently in Europol than they are in the United States or such large things like a Drinkhoff. We will not be requiring daily tests, but you will need to be able to prove what we in Germany call the proof of immunization. Basically, you are either vaccinated or that you have had COVID previously, so that you are healed of COVID, or that you have had a test. And tests can be valid either for 24 hours for the fast antigen tests, for these rapid tests, or 48 hours for PCR. So it's basically one of both. Well, in Germany, I'm trying to now I'm going to look short with my phone. So we have the standardized on the European level those kind of things.
Yeah, the vaccine passport, I think, is what
Right.
I've heard it called in Europe.
So those it's either a vaccine or a convalescent passport. So even if I have had COVID, I can get this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. In that case, I do not need to be vaccinated. I just need to. In Germany, you go to the next pharmacy to get this based on your positive PCR test from the past. So it's relatively simple to organize this for people in Europe. So we will need to see for the people in the States, because I know, and this is one of the challenges we are solving now, that our the apps that read those QR codes do not work with American QR codes. But we are going to solve that way. I'm going maybe to ping Jason and Derek on the side and to see how to best solve that thing, not to have queues being formed on the entrance. But
yeah,
those are the small logistical issues we are going to get
the big call out there was they highlighted very well the process for submitting your test.
Mm-hmm.
What got missed and was a big miss was there were a handful of people that showed up with the event with the expectation that they could enter and had paid for plane tickets, paid for lodging, taken off of work, and there was a fine print component that they did not expect that kept them from being able to attend. And those caused very loud and vocal responses. So whatever testing you put into place, whatever safety regulations, the ones that are going to stop somebody at the door need to be focused on very high level.
Yes,
so,
we are not doing any fine print. Spence is managing communications.
Yeah, it'll all be in a very large red font. But yes, I mean, it's absolutely right to highlight that, and both to give people confidence, but also to underline that we'll be very explicit in terms of the entry requirements to the venue and any other event associated shenanigans like with the SharePoint, etc. I think another thing, just on the sort of the badges and the mask impact. I mean, obviously, no doubt there will, that will have an impact in terms of the interaction and just generally being able to hear people or understand them, I should say, for those with hearing difficulties. Interestingly enough, the badge aspect we've kind of always hated and never really come up with the ideal solution to it, but we do think we're improving every time, and certainly this whole thing where you're sort of looking down at somebody's badge whilst they're talking to you has always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And I think one of the things that we introduced last time, which is actually a couple of years ago now, but the last event we really sort of brought into fore is our the app that we have for the conference for the attendees, which allows them to connect with other attendees and vendors and everything like that, schedule meetups and those kind of things. And it is improving the situation, regardless of the additional aggravation that the pandemic puts on top. Not saying it's the complete solution, but it's certainly helpful in that respect. So in other words, reducing the amount of time that you might be sort of marching around the expo hall trying to find somebody, but yes, certainly masks are going to have a negative impact. There's no question about that. And, obviously we hope that in the future we'll be able to go back to an event that doesn't require them. Otherwise, we basically have to follow the state regulations that are in place with a particular location and make the best of it. But I think also that's quite important that everybody involved at these types of events, not just ours, but the small user groups and everything, is just that little bit more patient with everybody else, because it's a busy environment. Everybody might feel a bit of time pressure. I really need to speak to John to get that answer I'm looking for, that kind of thing. And it's for everybody to kind of just chill out a little bit and understand it's difficult for all of us, and just be a little bit more patient and understanding. And talk slower as well. I mean, something that perhaps I should learn to do. But at the event, just ease off the sort of expectation. I mean, actually, it's one of the things that I always sort of disliked about the larger events, particularly the ones run by vendors. And I'm not just talking about one vendor, I'm talking about lots of them, is the sort of expectation on the speakers that they're sort of they're there to be sort of picked at, it can be very difficult, particularly for some of the stars of the show that don't seem to get any break time for themselves. Everybody needs that little bit of chill time, and that goes for everybody. Even the catering staff, and we try our best to make that happen.
That's great.
Oh,
One other
so
idea, really quickly, to add in that was cute, and I think, Spence, you should probably get like a Mylar balloon. It's helium with your face on it, and just walk around with that. I think Jace already has some of his. I have.
Of course.
You don't need a balloon for that. You just need to make him angry for a few seconds, and then it works that way. No balloons involved.
So Dreamforce also had buttons where you could very clearly specify whether you were open to handshaking, elbow bumping, fist bumping, hugs, because I haven't seen you. They tried to get ahead of that awkward, how do we interact with each other in person now in this new world. That was an interesting, I don't know that it worked. I didn't see it very powerful, but it was an interesting acknowledgement of that new normal.
Yeah, we did actually think about that quite some months ago with somebody else that helps us on the sidelines, as a sort of consigliere, if you will. And the sort of recognition of what type of social distancing is in effect at these kind of things is a very interesting challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen it done where, stoplight colored little, they're not nylon, but they're plastic wristbands. Very obvious, red, don't come near me. Yellow, if you know me, then that's fine. And green, I'll hug anybody, kind of a thing. That type of thing I've seen done at a number of events and pretty successfully. That way, it's right there on your wrist. You just look at it, so you're not awkwardly glancing, looking for the button on somebody somewhere. So I've seen that. They actually did that kind of a thing at Ignite a couple of years ago, way before all of this happened. And Andrew Connell, I think, stole all of the "Don't talk to me" buttons.
I was going to say, can we get him some colored wristbands for the airplane so people will know not to speak to him on airplanes? But this leads into one of the follow-on questions that I had, that besides the pandemic just making it so much harder, giving you so much more you have to think about in organizing a conference. I mean, who would have thought a few years ago that all these things had to come into play? But there are challenges that are unique to going into scale from a smaller conference that you just wouldn't think of if you've run. Jason and I have both run SharePoint Saturday type events. Paul's run the events and helped run them with us at relatively small scale. But when you go from that to the bigger conference, it really amplifies some of the challenges. So Spence and Addis, if I could get each of you to sort of chime in here, what do you think is the biggest challenge in moving from organizing, let's say, a relatively small conference into one that's larger?
Well, yeah, there are many. I'll do a few that are kind of sort of from my perspective. I basically predominantly look after the content for ECS, so that's really what drives most of my thoughts here. The first one is timing, basically. So if you think about a one-day event, and maybe it runs from, say, 9 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the evening, and you've got maybe 4 tracks. You've got X amount of stuff, and it's relatively easy to sort of marshal that so that things start and finish on time, and there's enough time for coffee and lunch, etc. When you then sort of try and take that and make it 14 and have a longer day and do 2 days, it's not exponential. In other words, the problem just gets ridiculously complicated, particularly when you've got to then factor in things like when people are flying in and when are they leaving, and which people are going to drink too much the night before and not make the first slot, those kind of things. They all become, I'm not looking at anybody in particular right now. And so those things become, substantially larger. And I think the other main one from my perspective is to retain at least a degree of cognizance of quality level and be trying to match where you want to be. Because the bigger you are, the more speakers you have, the more content you have, the more varied, backgrounds of different people. You're going to have speakers you don't know at a large event. It's just a fact. Whereas if it's a small one-day event, chances are at least one of the people in the org team is going to know all the speakers, and so those two things get much bigger. There's obviously lots more where basically everything gets more difficult the bigger you are, whether it's the catering and or whatever it might be. Have you got enough toilets in the venue? Working with the venue in particular, you need a professional venue that is willing to work with you rather than just saying, "Hey, Oracle, can you lend us your office for an afternoon?" That kind of thing. And if you get a inexperienced venue, which we did have for a different event in London, the first time was a very interesting experience working with that conference center for the first time, because conference centers are very good at doing a carbon copy. This is what they do. This is what they offer. Then you come along with a technology conference that might want something a bit more interesting, like a projector screen where you can actually read the code from 20 rows back. Generally that tends not to be a problem if you're in the Microsoft offices. Sometimes it is, but usually you're all right. But if you go to a different type of venue, those things that we would naturally assume are pretty simple become quite complicated. So yeah, those are the things from my point of view that are really obviously a big difference between smaller events and larger ones. There's obviously many others.
I mean, from my perspective, there are really two. I mean, there are many things. I mean, we could talk only about that now for days. There are two things which are really striking. And while Spence was talking, I took a short look on the number of the email messages that came today in the ticketing system. 265 from attendees and 109 from sponsors. Speakers are not there; they are coming directly to Spence. So I add a number of speakers which come to that. So there is no way you manage that a bit on a side.
Yeah.
This just does not work. I mean, just the word ticketing system. Yes, we have got a ticketing system because there is no other way we will be able to manage that. I mean, and people are people. When you have 2,000 people, they're asking all sorts of things. Some are very classical questions and answers, and some is where you ask yourself, why I am doing this and why does it need to be this way? And this is just humans being humans. This is all normal. This is all fine. This is one thing. And now I'm following what Spence said about those projectors. The first time when we did the Zagreb in 2017, this is where we see also the costs starting exponentially growing. I remember showing for fun, because it's really no secret, the final cost sheet to our common Portuguese friend, which we all very well know, because we were together at that point of time. I got the mail with the final cost. I just turned my cell phone and showed it to him, and he almost sat. He literally could not stand on the feet. He just sat down. So you can't be afraid of the costs. This projector that Spence is talking about is 20,000 euros for the big room for the 3 days. So there are just different things that you need to not only the projector but the whole setup for that big room.
Yeah.
You remember, Spence, what we were talking about the other latest tech setup. It's just different level of costs of amount of work and different level of cost that you need to manage and to see, okay, how does this work. This is why most of those smaller events don't make that step, because people are afraid to go exactly that few steps forward to change some things in their thinking. And again, we have a common friend that we are trying to talk to for many years to make those few steps, but he passionately wouldn't. And you all know whom I'm talking about here. But the amount of work, and this is what I said before. Most of the people from the community who wanted to jump in to say, "Hey, I'm with you. I want to help." After they've seen what's going on, they were just, "No, not really. and just walk aside, because this is not being us having beer every day and dreaming of what we can all do to make this happen and to be cool. This is actually hours and hours of every day for many weeks to actually make that happen. And those are the two large challenges: the amount of work and the amount of cost, expenses grow exponentially. This is just, you see this spike in those two things.
Yeah, everything becomes more complex. If we stick to the projector example, because it's a relatively simple thing that people can get their head around. From us, even if I think about some of the rooms that we had in London, which would hold 90, 130, something like that, in quite a small space, admittedly. That venue, it was basically a question of plugging your laptop into a VGA port or whatever it was, and then that was directly through to the sound and the audio. And that's generally the way it goes in most large meeting rooms, right? Whereas for any of these big rooms that we are now working with, it's a DI box, a video mixer, a whole bunch of cables, additional costs for all the different speakers, and then you're going to think about cameras and so on if you wanted to be live streaming that particular presentation. And so you go from what you can reasonably do in any kind of real office situation, from basically doing, for all intents purposes, a professional AV presentation. And of course, you need somebody, a technician or two or three, to be fiddling with the knobs and doing all of that stuff as well. And then you times that by however many rooms you've got that need it. Obviously, not all rooms are going to need it, but most of them do to a certain extent. So the complexity becomes a management challenge, not just because of the bits and bobs involved, but you've got more people involved, and most of them don't work for you. They work for somebody else. So then you've got that complexity again is is a skyrocketing thing. All of these things can be dealt with, but as Addis sort of intimated, you've got to be willing to change your sort of mindset, your attitude towards it, to accept that is going to be part and parcel of it, and then take action to mitigate the potential calamity that could come from a whole bunch of different parties being involved, and sort of have plenty of people there that can help out, smooth out all the kinks. We're lucky because after the decision to move to Germany, we know that the places we approach to host the event are going to have relationships with people that can help us in those areas. But nonetheless, it still does require a bit of elbow grease, basically, as we call it here in the UK, to make it run relatively, we hope, touch wood, smoothly on the night, as it were.
And sometimes those relations which they have with those people are not always to our benefit, as you also learn.
Catering would be the other classic example, right?
Yeah.
There, the bigger the numbers, the more catastrophic it could be, and the more effort required to make it go smoothly.
So
and that's how you end up with asparagus
just to finish this one. Just to finish on this one, on the challenges, and really, it's not a challenge of every year, but with that size, you obviously have running costs if you do the conference or not. And when something like COVID pandemic happens, where 18 years you are sitting on the running costs without basically being able to do the conference, that hurts.
Yeah,
it's just what it is.
Understandable.
The 18-month flag was a killer. I get it.
Yeah,
I'm so glad you guys are actually able to do it in person this time. So.
Yeah, it's absolutely critical if you do want to kind of make a step, even if it's not to the biggest one ever, but on the journeys. Don't go into it with any illusions on the finances. You've got to have totally wide eyes there and be aware. You can't wing it and be successful. You've got to be solid in order to make the attempt. Otherwise, you're just going to end up hurting, and nobody wants that.
Yeah, indeed. So let's wrap up with one final thought, because something interesting has happened here with this particular conference, and it grew from a community event into a small community event into a large community event. And I was lucky to be part of some of those lead ups in Zagreb, or watch this thing as it grew, which was a very fun thing to be part of. And I will be eternally grateful, Addis, to you introducing me to the wonder that is Chavapi. But what's happened from ECS is we've now seen it kind of go the other way, where from ECS we've grown and sort of germinated these smaller conferences in the whole collab days idea, where we've taken this concept of what ECS does and does well, and put it into like a small package to disseminate out to these other venues. So with only a couple minutes left, give me your thoughts on how the whole collab days thing has come together.
Spence?
Yeah, so I mean, it's not just ECS. I mean, we certainly were sort of instrumental there, but it's also taking the best from the SharePoint Saturdays in Europe in particular. That's our area of expertise. And so, looking at the ones and how they did things that worked well, and taking the best of that, but also offering, support in terms of what we've learned through the ECS journey, and then sort of basically saying, hey, to the rest of the community, for your local small events, if you want it to be a 2-day thing instead of just a Saturday, or you want it on Friday because everybody in a certain country in the west of Europe doesn't like doing things on a Saturday, go ahead and take our sort of toolkit, to make your life easier in terms of whether that might be, the attendee management or the scheduling or whatever. And I think that was really where we, wanted to give back a little bit based on our, the positivity that we got from the community that helped us be successful.
Plus, we helped them establish contacts with sponsors, and we helped with marketing. Two very important things actually to do that. Due to the nature of the ECS, we obviously have contact with the majority of the vendors, and really good contact with the majority of the vendors in Microsoft's collaboration space. And some of them are also willing to support those smaller local events. But now, what is local, what is not? One is the issue that when the Collab Days started its journey, the pandemic came, so all of them became suddenly global. So there's another component to all of that. But we do really help them with marketing. And now we see the first in-person events of Collab Days, like Lisbon, like Barcelona happening. Or Lisbon is, I think, hybrid. Barcelona is fully in-person, and this kind of stuff happening now, happening now in person, going back. So we really, we deliver the platform for them, for the software to run them, and we help with marketing and with sponsors.
Yeah, and it's
And
worth
I can say
it's worth pointing out briefly that before pandemic, a lot of the smaller local events were really struggling to get the sponsors in particular. And I think that, as Addis mentioned, we could be really instrumental in, because if you're someplace and you're really struggling to pay for the food, that shouldn't be the case. And if there's a way we can grease the wheels a little bit and make that easier, then definitely we're going to do it, right?
Yeah, and I can say from behind the scenes, full disclosure, I'm on the organizing committee for Collab Days, and working with the team. Just think of the team that we have together here, right? The U.S., Germany, the Balkans, UK. We've got Belgium, Portugal, Spain, Netherlands, right? We've got this whole global team. And we all have the same vision, and we're all on the same page, and we can actually get on a call and not bicker about little minutia and whatnot. And we're all working towards the same goal. Has been really, really refreshing, and putting that all together. So unfortunately, we're out of time. We could obviously talk on and on about these topics, but we're out of time for this particular show. So I just want to wrap up, of course, with a huge thank you to our guests, Spence and Addis, for joining us this time around and discussing this with us. We should mention to everybody that these will obviously is recorded. So as soon as we're done here, it'll be available on the YouTube channel shortly after that, and on our Facebook page as well. I want to thank our sponsors at Aptigent. And of course, we want to thank European Collaboration Summit and the organizers for all they do for the community. And if you have not registered for that, we put a link, pardon me, in the show for you to go out and check that out. Pardon me, sorry.
Oh, good.
That probably good timing then that we're all done here. So we appreciate everyone for joining us this month. We'll be back again next month with another set of interesting information. Spence and Addis, thank you for taking time out of your evening for doing this. Jason, Paul, we'll see you next, guys.
Yeah.
See you
Thanks.
next.
Bye, everyone.